Top frames college student. Doesn't know his dad's a 4-star general. Before we go further, please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this one. It was the kind of afternoon where sunlight stretched long shadows across the suburban streets surrounding Westbrook University. Students filtered off campus, cars lined the café district, and the city hummed in a quiet, steady rhythm. Marcus Taylor's silver sedan moved smoothly along the boulevard, his mind preoccupied with class notes and a pending internship interview. A crisp navy blazer rested perfectly over his shoulders, reflecting his careful, methodical nature. Behind him, the piercing flash of blue lights cracked the calm. Marcus's gaze shifted briefly to the mirror. A patrol car pressed closer, siren chirping once before falling silent. Without hesitation, Marcus steered to the curb, easing the car to a precise stop. Officer Ryan Caldwell stepped out. His boots hit the asphalt with sharp, deliberate taps. His uniform was immaculate, badge polished, but it was the slight curl of his lip and the narrowed eyes that revealed more than protocol. Caldwell adjusted his belt as he approached, the weight of self-assured authority rolling off him. Leaning slightly into the driver's window, he didn't offer a greeting. License and registration. His voice clipped and cold, carrying an edge that demanded compliance, not cooperation. Marcus reached calmly into his jacket pocket, then into the glove box, movement smooth and deliberate. He handed over the requested documents with a quiet nod. His expression was neutral, eyes steady. Caldwell studied the papers for barely a breath before his gaze returned, sharper. "Where are you heading in such a hurry?" "No hurry, sir. Just heading home from campus." Marcus answered evenly, his tone devoid of defensiveness. Caldwell's jaw flexed. His fingers drummed against the papers before flicking them back at Marcus dismissively. "Step out of the car." There was no clear cause, no explanation, yet Marcus didn't argue. He unlocked the door, stepped out, and stood by the hood of his car. His tall frame straightened, shoulders squared, not defiant, simply assured. Caldwell wasted no time. Circling the car, he tugged open doors and rummaged through compartments. His motions were too practiced, too intent. Under the guise of searching, his gloved hand slid beneath the passenger seat. With a flick of his wrist, a small, sealed packet slipped into place, barely visible but damning in the wrong context. Marcus saw it. He didn't flinch. His lips pressed together slightly, the only sign of realization flickering across his face. His eyes stayed locked on Caldwell's every move, but he made no protest, no hasty gesture that could be misread. On the sidewalk, a pair of students slowed, curiosity drawn by the escalating scene. A man sipping coffee paused at a nearby bench. A woman discreetly lifted her phone, camera lens peeking above her purse. The subtle weight of silent witnesses gathered around them. Caldwell straightened with mock satisfaction, his fingers gripping the packet as he held it aloft. His gaze narrowed, the smirk almost imperceptible. Well, looks like we've got a problem here." Marcus didn't take his eyes off him. His voice, when it came, was calm. "I'd like to make a phone call." Caldwell blinked, briefly thrown by the lack of panic or objection. "You're going downtown first. Then you can make all the calls you want." His hand closed over Marcus's wrist as he spun him to cuff him, metal clinking in the still air. Around them, the café chatter faltered. A few more phones quietly rose, recording. The sunlight no longer warmed the street, it sharpened angles, turned glints on badges and lenses cold. Marcus stood still as the cuffs locked over his wrists. His jaw set, but his demeanor remained composed. "Officer, I will make that phone call now." There was no plea, no raised voice, just clarity and calm. Caldwell hesitated for a second longer than necessary, weighing something invisible. Finally, with a scoff, he jerked his head toward the patrol car. "Fine. One call. Make it quick." In the cruiser, Marcus dialed a memorized number, hands steady even in the restraints. His voice was quiet, measured. No dramatics, just a simple explanation and location. When he finished, he leaned back against the seat and exhaled slowly, gaze steady out the window. Caldwell slammed the driver's door and pulled away from the curb with a jerk of the wheel. The flashing lights blinked against storefront windows and faded down the boulevard. Back on the sidewalk, phones lowered but remained gripped tightly in hands. Conversations reignited, hushed and urgent. Videos uploaded quietly into the endless tide of digital spaces, timestamped and geotagged. But for Marcus Taylor, none of that mattered just yet. In his pocket, his father's number was no longer just a contact. It was the key to unraveling the scene that had just unfolded. A scene where calm had masked resolve and truth had silently observed injustice staking its claim far too easily. The packet pinched between Officer Caldwell's gloved fingers gleamed under the late afternoon light, damning in its simplicity. His lips twitched into something between a smirk and a sneer. Lifting it just high enough for the small crowd to see, he barked, "Well, looks like we've got ourselves a little problem here." His voice cut across the still street, sharp and commanding. Without wasting another second, Caldwell spun Marcus around, shoving his arms behind him. The metallic snap of handcuffs echoed louder than it should have in the quiet stretch of pavement. He gripped Marcus's shoulder with unnecessary force, pressing him against the hood of the sedan. From the sidewalk, a few passers-by froze. The woman with the phone continued recording, her brow furrowing as she captured the unfolding scene. Another bystander whispered urgently into his own phone, eyes darting between Caldwell and Marcus. Marcus, despite the rough handling, stood unbroken. His gaze remained fixed ahead, unflinching. His breath was steady, even as the cuffs bit into his wrists. No protest escaped his lips, no futile struggle, just the same quiet, centered composure that had carried him through the stop. Caldwell, still playing to the imaginary audience of his own bravado, gripped Marcus by the elbow and guided him toward the patrol car with clipped, forceful steps. "You're under arrest for possession of controlled substances," he declared flatly, loud enough for surrounding ears. Before Caldwell could shove him into the back seat, Marcus turned his head slightly. His voice was smooth, measured. "I'd like to make a phone call." The officer froze momentarily, eyes narrowing as if weighing the request against his own irritation. Then, with a dismissive scoff, he rolled his shoulders. "One call. Make it quick. Won't change where you're going." His tone dripped with condescension. He opened the back door, roughly guiding Marcus inside before pulling a department-issued phone from his belt. With a sharp flick of his wrist, he handed it over. Marcus, wrists cuffed, carefully angled the device, dialing from memory with a precision born of preparation, not panic. The phone pressed to his ear. His voice dropped to a low, calm cadence. Words crisp, direct, without embellishment. He spoke no more than a few quiet sentences before ending the call and handing the phone back. His eyes, steady as ever, met Caldwell's briefly, betraying nothing. The officer yanked the door shut with a hollow thud and strode around the cruiser, sinking into the driver's seat. His jaw worked in quiet satisfaction. As he accelerated away from the scene, his smirk returned, this time tinged with self-assurance. Another easy arrest, another notch on the record. He'd been here before, too many times to count, and always the narrative bent to his side. The precinct came into view, its brick facade stark against the shifting sky. Inside, fluorescent lights cast a sterile pallor over worn desks and computer screens. Caldwell entered briskly, nodding at fellow officers as he guided Marcus into processing. He unloaded the bagged evidence onto a table, voice smooth as he dictated false details into his report. His pen scratched confidently against the form, fabricating context, solidifying his version of the truth. His colleagues hardly glanced twice. Many had long stopped asking questions when Caldwell brought in arrests like this. Routine. Predictable. Yet as he finished the paperwork outside the precinct walls, something very different was set in motion. Miles away, down the straight stretch of asphalt leading from Fort Bridgewater, the distinct rumble of engines filled the air. A convoy of black SUVs rolled steadily toward the city, their tinted windows reflecting the dying light. Headlights pierced through the soft haze of dusk, unwavering and precise. Inside the lead vehicle, General Anthony Taylor sat composed, his uniform immaculate, adorned with decades' worth of medals and insignias. His jaw was set, gaze focused straight ahead. Seated beside him, a military legal advisor reviewed a briefcase of documents with meticulous care. The convoy carved through traffic effortlessly, escorted by an unspoken authority that parted cars and pedestrians alike. The mission was clear, the response swift. Back at the precinct, Caldwell leaned back in his chair, fingers laced behind his head, savoring the ease with which the situation had unfolded. The evidence was logged. The paperwork was clean, at least to anyone not paying close attention. His smirk deepened, unaware that the foundation beneath him had already begun to fracture. Marcus sat quietly in the holding room, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. His earlier phone call lingered in the air between past and present, invisible but undeniable. He didn't glance at the clock. He didn't shift restlessly. He simply waited, knowing precisely what was already unfolding beyond the station walls. Outside, the hum of the approaching convoy grew nearer. The lead SUV signaled sharply before turning into the precinct parking lot. Tires crunched over the gravel, the vehicles coming to an exact, synchronized stop. General Taylor stepped out first, smoothing his jacket with practiced precision. His boots struck the concrete with purpose. Behind him, advisors and military legal personnel followed in silent formation. The gravity of their arrival seemed to ripple outward, unseen but deeply felt. Inside, one officer peered out a window and blinked. His brow furrowed in confusion. Caldwell, we've got something outside. You might want to see this." Unaware of the shift rolling toward him, Caldwell dismissed the remark with a wave, still basking in what he thought was another closed case. But momentum had already changed hands. And before the hour would pass, the air in the precinct, once so heavy with unchallenged authority, would grow sharp with accountability. Marcus sat motionless still, eyes soft but knowing, as if he could feel the weight of approaching footsteps even through walls. Change was no longer coming. It had already arrived. The door of the lead SUV swung open with a sharp, deliberate motion. Out stepped General Anthony Taylor, his presence cutting through the air like a blade. His uniform was immaculate, deep navy fabric pressed to crisp lines, brass buttons polished to a mirror's gleam. Ribbons and medals shimmered across his chest, every insignia telling the story of a decorated career that had spanned decades and continents. He stood tall, shoulders squared and back straight, eyes forward with an unwavering gaze. The kind of posture that came not just from training, but from years of command. Without a word, his boots struck the pavement in steady rhythm as he advanced toward the precinct doors. Behind him, his entourage followed in lockstep, military legal advisors and aides moving with silent precision. Inside the station, the usual murmur of low chatter and shuffling papers slowed to a crawl. Officers glanced toward the entrance as the front doors eased open, their hinges groaning slightly under the weight of the moment. General Taylor's silhouette framed in the doorway pulled the collective focus of the room. Conversation stalled. Fingers hovered over keyboards mid-press. Even the faint buzz of the overhead lights seemed to dull. Officer Caldwell, still leaning smugly at the front desk, felt the first faint ripple of uncertainty prickle the back of his neck. He straightened slightly, his earlier bravado twitching at the edges. General Taylor didn't rush. His steps were precise, each one a statement of absolute control. His eyes scanned the room once, cool and calculating, before locking onto the holding area where his son sat. Marcus, composed as ever, rose silently to his feet as his father approached, a quiet nod passing between them, an exchange of mutual understanding that needed no words. Caldwell cleared his throat, pushing off the desk and attempting to reclaim his earlier swagger. He strode forward, lips parting as if to issue some rote line of protocol. But before a sound could leave his mouth, the general's voice met him, low, deliberate, unyielding. "I'm General Anthony Taylor, United States Army." His tone was calm, but layered with the unmistakable weight of command. "I'm here to secure the immediate release of my son, Marcus Taylor. I am formally requesting access to all body cam footage, evidence logs, and full documentation pertaining to his detainment." The room didn't move. Even the dispatch radio, crackling faintly in the background, seemed subdued by the gravity in the general's words. His legal precision cut through the tension cleanly, no raised voice, no wasted phrasing. Just direct, authoritative command wrapped in ironclad professionalism. Caldwell's smirk faltered, sliding from his face as if peeled away by an invisible hand. His eyes darted momentarily toward his colleagues, but no backup came. Around the room, officers shifted uneasily, glances bouncing between General Taylor and the desk sergeant like uncertain chess pieces. General Taylor stepped forward again, sliding a meticulously folded document from his inner jacket. He handed it to the nearest officer, a formal legal demand drafted by military counsel. The officer blinked, his throat bobbing nervously as he accepted it and scanned the text. "Furthermore," the general continued, his gaze never wavering from Caldwell, "I expect full clarification of the charges that warranted this arrest. I trust your documentation will withstand legal scrutiny. Marcus, standing quietly behind his father, remained composed. His posture echoed the same calm as General Taylor's, their shared stillness amplifying the growing unease settling over the precinct. Caldwell opened his mouth again, but no confident retort came forth. His mind tumbled backward through the last hour, the planted evidence, the falsified report, the ease with which he had assumed this would all pass unnoticed. Now, with the decorated general standing squarely in front of him, every misstep suddenly loomed enormous. The desk sergeant, recognizing the delicate balance unraveling in front of him, cleared his throat and motioned to a junior officer. Retrieve the evidence log and body cam files from Caldwell's unit. Now. His voice carried a slight edge, less a suggestion, more an urgent command. The junior officer scurried away. General Taylor, without breaking eye contact, took a measured breath. His composure radiated authority honed from decades of navigating high-stakes negotiations and tense standoffs. His tone remained even, never needing to rise. I recommend you act swiftly, officer, he told Caldwell, the faintest thread of steel woven through his words. Any further delay or obstruction will be escalated through military and federal channels immediately. Caldwell's throat tightened. His usual smirk, his fallback in moments of challenge, no longer surfaced. Instead, beads of sweat began to gather along his brow, the weight of impending consequences settling squarely on his shoulders. Across the room, other officers quietly peeled away, distancing themselves from Caldwell as if aware that lines of allegiance were shifting fast. A few exchanged glances laced with wariness, their curiosity sharpening into concern. Marcus stepped beside his father now, his expression impassive but confident. Together, they stood as a united front, unshaken, composed, undeniable. Their silence did more to tilt the balance of the room than any shouted accusation could have. Minutes later, the junior officer returned, a file clutched tightly in hand and a flash drive containing body cam footage. The sergeant accepted it quickly, setting it on the counter in front of General Taylor with care. Sir, here's everything requested, the sergeant said quietly, deliberately bypassing Caldwell as he addressed the general directly. We'll process the release paperwork immediately. The general gave a curt nod, finally breaking his gaze from Caldwell to review the materials. His advisors stepped in now, setting to work with clinical efficiency. Caldwell took an involuntary step back, shoulders slightly hunched as his confidence visibly crumbled. The room's attention shifted subtly, the tide fully turning against him. Where moments before he had basked in control, he now stood isolated, exposed beneath the sharp, unflinching scrutiny of legal authority far beyond his reach. As the release forms were signed and Marcus's cuffs removed, General Taylor turned back toward Caldwell one final time. His voice remained calm, his words precise. Officer, expect an immediate inquiry into your conduct. You will be contacted shortly by both military and civilian legal representatives. He didn't wait for acknowledgement. With effortless control, he guided Marcus toward the exit, aides flanking them smoothly as they departed. As the precinct door swung shut behind them, Caldwell stood alone, the hum of the station slowly resuming, but with a new, heavier undertone. His earlier certainty had evaporated, leaving only the cold shadow of accountability in its place. Inside a dimly lit conference room deep within the precinct, a muted hum of electronics filled the air. The walls, lined with plaques and faded precinct awards, seemed to close in around the long rectangular table at the center. Seated at its head, General Anthony Taylor leaned forward with practiced focus, his fingers steepled, eyes locked on the screen in front of him. On either side of him sat military legal advisors and senior police officials, their expressions uniformly serious. Across the table, Marcus Taylor sat quietly, hands folded on the table, his composure unchanged. His presence anchored the room. The room dimmed as an officer tapped the keyboard, bringing the body cam footage to life. The familiar grainy image flickered on screen. Caldwell's voice echoed from the small speakers, confident, overbearing, sharp with manufactured authority. They watched as the video unfolded moment by moment. The unjustified stop, the needless aggression, and then the unmistakable action. On screen, Caldwell's gloved hand slipped beneath the driver's seat. His movements were deliberate, quick, but not quick enough to escape the unblinking lens of his own body cam. The small, sealed packet appeared where none had been before. A quiet, almost imperceptible gasp escaped one of the precinct officials. The footage froze. No one spoke at first. The silence settled heavy in the room, broken only by the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. General Taylor didn't shift in his seat, his expression carved from granite. He gave a single, subtle nod to the legal advisor beside him. "Frame by frame, please," the advisor said crisply. The officer complied. Slowly, the incriminating moment replayed, each second magnified. The intent was now irrefutable. At the back of the room, the door eased open with a soft click. 2 internal affairs officers stepped in, press suits, neutral expressions, clipboards in hand. Without fanfare, they moved to the table and began reviewing documentation, their presence adding a new gravity to the already tense room. Caldwell sat on the far end of the room, shoulders hunched, eyes darting nervously. His earlier bravado had long since evaporated. His uniform now seemed too tight around his collar, beads of sweat tracing a line down his temple. His fingers tapped anxiously on the armrest, a quiet staccato betraying his unraveling composure. One of the senior police officials, Chief Reynolds, cleared his throat. His jaw flexed visibly as he addressed Caldwell, voice clipped and cool. "Officer Caldwell, you've had ample opportunity to clarify the circumstances surrounding this arrest. This footage leaves no ambiguity. You knowingly planted false evidence on Mr. Taylor." Caldwell's lips parted, a weak protest forming, but the internal affairs officer nearest to him raised a hand calmly, cutting him off. "We'll take your formal statement shortly. I suggest you speak carefully," the officer said, his voice even but laced with authority. Across the room, Marcus remained still, his gaze locked on Caldwell. There was no triumph in his expression, no flicker of vengeance, just steady, silent resolve. His calm contrasted sharply with Caldwell's increasing distress. General Taylor, never one for unnecessary words, shifted slightly, his gaze sweeping over the room. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the unmistakable weight of finality. "The integrity of your department," he said quietly, addressing the senior officials, "rests on how swiftly and transparently you respond to this breach of justice. An officer abusing his position to target an innocent citizen cannot be allowed to remain under the protection of a badge." Chief Reynolds gave a somber nod. His earlier defensiveness softened, replaced by a reluctant respect for the clarity with which the general operated. He turned to internal affairs. "Proceed." The IA officers stepped forward smoothly, one placing a thick file in front of Caldwell. His name was printed cleanly across the tab. The other officer began gathering statements from the senior officials present, meticulously cataloging each piece of evidence. Caldwell's breathing grew shallow. His eyes flicked repeatedly toward the door, as if calculating escape routes that no longer existed. The realization dawned visibly on his face. There would be no quiet exit, no buried report this time. His career, painstakingly built on authority and manipulation, was crumbling inch by inch in front of a captive audience. An aide approached General Taylor, quietly handing him a printed transcript of the footage and an official complaint drafted for filing. The general accepted it with a nod, sliding the document neatly into his briefcase. "I will be forwarding these materials to both federal oversight bodies and military legal channels," he informed the room without raising his voice. "If necessary, formal charges of civil rights violations and misconduct will be pursued at the federal level." Marcus spoke for the first time then. His voice was calm but clear enough to carry across the table. "I'm not interested in revenge," he said evenly, his eyes still locked on Caldwell. "I'm interested in making sure no one else goes through what I did." His words landed heavily. They weren't dramatic. They didn't need to be. Their quiet certainty said more than a shouted accusation ever could. Caldwell's shoulders sagged visibly. His eyes, rimmed red now, dropped to the floor as if physically weighed down by the enormity of his unraveling position. Across the table, Chief Reynolds gave a sharp nod to the IA officers. "Remove his badge and weapon," he ordered tersely. The action was swift. An officer approached Caldwell, who, after a long, trembling pause, unclipped his badge and set it on the table with a soft clink. His sidearm followed moments later. Internal affairs cuffed him not with spectacle but with methodical professionalism. There were no jeers, no shouted condemnation, just the efficient reversal of power, clean and absolute. As Caldwell was led from the room, his footsteps echoing faintly down the corridor, the precinct seemed to exhale collectively. General Taylor rose smoothly from his chair, closing his briefcase with a crisp snap. His eyes met Marcus's once more. A subtle nod passed between father and son. One of quiet victory, of justice served not through bluster, but through resolve and unshakable truth. Without another word, the general turned toward the exit, Marcus walking at his side. Behind them, the precinct buzzed with renewed energy as internal affairs officers continued to process the fallout, proof that sometimes the truth cuts sharper and cleaner than any accusation. By dawn, the story had ignited far beyond the courthouse walls. Cable news banners flashed bold headlines. Officer accused of framing general's son. Justice in motion. Across living rooms and smartphones, faces of Marcus Taylor and General Anthony Taylor dominated the screens. Within hours, the incident became a national talking point. In newsroom studios, anchors delivered updates with polished urgency. Clips of Marcus's calm demeanor during the arrest, juxtaposed with General Taylor's composed but commanding intervention, ran on a loop. Footage of Officer Caldwell's planting of evidence, dissected frame by legal analysts, left little room for ambiguity. Every gesture, every word from that fateful encounter had become part of a public dossier. Simultaneously, social media platforms exploded. Hashtags like #JusticeForMarcus, #AccountabilityNow, and #IntegrityMatters surged into trending topics. Millions shared the videos captured by bystanders, their captions filled with outrage and reflection. Tweets praised Marcus's poise under pressure, calm under fire, grace under injustice. Memes, commentary, and video breakdowns flooded timelines, transforming the incident into both a symbol of systemic flaws and a testament to the power of evidence and truth. In neighborhoods across the country, the story sparked community action. Leaders organized impromptu press conferences, standing before rows of microphones with conviction. Reverend Lisa Grant, a respected voice in civic activism, addressed a crowd gathered on courthouse steps. "What we witnessed was not just an act of misconduct," she said, her voice steady, but a clear reminder of how fragile justice can be when power goes unchecked. Yet, in Marcus Taylor and General Taylor, we saw the embodiment of restraint, resilience, and rightful demand for truth. Interviews with witnesses from the café and precinct added further texture to the narrative. Local business owners, students, and even passers-by who had recorded the original footage recounted their shock at Caldwell's actions and their deep respect for how the Taylors handled the ordeal. "I couldn't believe what I saw," one young woman told reporters. "Marcus didn't flinch, didn't shout. He just stood there like he knew the truth would win out. That gave us all hope." In response to the media frenzy and rising public scrutiny, the police department acted swiftly. A formal statement was released within 24 hours. The chief of police, flanked by senior officials, appeared before a row of cameras. "On behalf of this department, we issue a full and unequivocal apology to Mr. Marcus Taylor and General Anthony Taylor," the chief declared. "Officer Caldwell has been placed on immediate suspension pending the outcome of legal proceedings. We are committed to full cooperation with the investigation and to re-earning the community's trust." The words were necessary but not sufficient to quell public sentiment. Editorials poured in from major newspapers, calling for broader reforms and citing the case as yet another example in a long line of abuses requiring systemic correction. Justice served, but vigilance needed. One op-ed read, cautioning readers against viewing this singular victory as a complete solution. Back on Marcus's college campus, the atmosphere shifted dramatically upon his return. As he stepped through the campus gates, peers lined the walkway, their applause rising steadily. Students raised handmade signs that read, "We stand with Marcus," and "Truth prevails." Some simply clapped quietly. Others offered nods of solidarity. His professors approached him in the days that followed, extending both academic leniency and personal support. "You handled yourself with more dignity than many twice your age," one history professor remarked after class. "That's something no one can take from you." Marcus, true to character, avoided grandstanding. He thanked his classmates and returned to his studies with quiet focus. Yet, his presence resonated differently now. Discussions in lecture halls turned to justice, civic duty, and the delicate balance of power in democratic societies. Inspired by recent events, student organizations scheduled forums on civil liberties and policing reform. Marcus's ordeal had sparked a deeper dialogue, one stretching far beyond his personal experience. Meanwhile, General Taylor's poised intervention earned admiration across varied circles. Veterans groups and active-duty military members publicly praised his balanced assertion of justice, lauding his dual roles as a father and principled leader. Editorials highlighted his conduct as an exemplar of moral leadership, untainted by bluster or retribution. The ripple effects touched even Caldwell's former colleagues. Within precinct walls, officers engaged in serious discussions about ethics and accountability. A junior officer, interviewed anonymously, admitted to introspection. Seeing it all laid out, the body cam footage, the fallout, it made me think harder about the badge I wear. We have to be better. No exceptions. News coverage began expanding to related themes. Segments explored past incidents of misconduct and analyzed best practices for de-escalation and transparency. Panels of legal experts, civil rights advocates, and former officers debated policy reforms late into primetime broadcasts. For Marcus, the days that followed were a balance of reflection and cautious optimism. His phone buzzed constantly, interview requests, thank you messages, invitations to speak at community events. Though flattered, he declined most, preferring to let the facts and actions already visible to the world speak for themselves. One afternoon, sitting quietly on a campus bench, Marcus scrolled through social media. Amidst the countless posts and tributes, a simple message caught his eye. It read, "You reminded us all how to stand tall with quiet strength. Thank you." He smiled softly, slipping his phone into his pocket as the campus buzzed around him. Though the storm of media attention would inevitably subside, the mark left by the incident was indelible. The intersection of injustice, evidence, and dignified resistance had captured the nation's consciousness. And in that moment, both Marcus and General Taylor stood as enduring symbols of how truth, even when tested, can prevail. The sky melted into shades of amber and gold as evening settled over the Taylor home. On the wide, wooden porch overlooking the city skyline, Marcus and General Anthony Taylor sat side by side, their silhouettes framed against the waning light. The hum of distant traffic blended with the occasional chirp of crickets. It was a quiet, unhurried space, a rare pause after weeks that had churned with noise and upheaval. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady on the horizon. "I didn't think it'd unfold like this," he said finally, his voice low but clear. "Not this fast. Not this clean." General Taylor rested his hands on his knees, metals catching the last slant of sunlight even in the relaxed setting. His posture, as always, was composed, but there was a softness in his eyes now. "Truth has a way of cutting through faster than we expect," he replied, "when it's backed by discipline and patience." For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them carried something deeper than words, an understanding forged through trial and vindication. Marcus had weathered injustice without breaking, and his father had stood beside him with the weight of experience and authority. "When you called me," General Taylor continued, "you didn't panic. You didn't shout. You trusted the process even when it was stacked against you." "I learned from you," Marcus answered quietly. The camera lingered on the porch as their conversation unfolded, touching on more than just the recent ordeal. They reflected on the broader arc. The slow, unglamorous work of standing against corruption and the importance of integrity when no one's watching. General Taylor spoke of his decades of service, moments when he'd faced similar crossroads and had to choose between easy silence and difficult truth. Back at the precinct, a different scene unfolded under harsher fluorescent light. Officer Ryan Caldwell, once so sure of his untouchable position, moved briskly through the department's corridors, cardboard box in hand. His desk, once cluttered with paperwork and personal trinkets, now sat empty. A thin stack of termination documents, freshly signed, rested on the supervisor's desk nearby. His badge and sidearm, already surrendered, left a hollow absence on his beltline. Colleagues gave nods of formal acknowledgement as he passed, but no one stepped forward to offer sympathy. His downfall had been public and undeniable. Misconduct caught in stark clarity, rebutted by unimpeachable evidence. The precinct, eager to demonstrate accountability, had processed his dismissal swiftly and without hesitation. Caldwell's shoulders, once squared with arrogant confidence, sagged under the quiet weight of finality. As he stepped through the exit doors for the last time, the department itself seemed to breathe easier, a symbolic purge not just of one man, but of the behaviors he embodied. The camera panned upward, framing the precinct facade under a clear sky before cutting to the campus. Marcus strode through sun-dappled pathways, his pace relaxed but purposeful. The semester had resumed its rhythm. Classmates crossed lawns with books and laptops in tow. Yet something intangible had shifted. Conversations lingered longer. Glances carried more awareness. His peers greeted him not with awkward pity but with genuine respect. He passed the campus library, where a flyer advertising a town hall on civil rights fluttered on a bulletin board. Across the quad, a professor spoke earnestly to a small circle of students under a tree. The atmosphere hummed with engagement, sparked by recent events but reaching towards something larger. Marcus had not sought to be a symbol, yet in standing firm he had inspired a quiet ripple of reflection in others. He reached the steps of the Humanities building and paused. The light caught his face, composed, steady, but unburdened now. A faint smile touched the corner of his lips as he surveyed the familiar landscape. His future stretched ahead, open and bright. As the screen softened, a narrator's voice emerged, measured and thoughtful. In the face of injustice, truth demands more than just discovery. It requires resilience, composure, and the courage to stand when standing feels impossible. Marcus Taylor's story is not just one of vindication, but of the quiet power found in integrity. His strength, mirrored in the unwavering support of a father and the clarity of undeniable evidence, reminds us all, accountability is not abstract. It is earned, demanded, and defended by those unwilling to look away. The camera returned one final time to the porch, where Marcus and General Taylor now sat in companionable silence as twilight deepened. A soft breeze stirred the edges of their jackets. Father and son, witnesses and participants in a hard-fought truth, watched as city lights flickered to life below, signaling the end of one chapter and the quiet promise of what lay ahead. The screen faded to black, leaving a closing message in simple white text: truth endures. Integrity matters. Justice belongs to those who refuse to yield. If you enjoyed this story, ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing, heartfelt stories like this. Also, let us know where you are watching from and drop your thoughts in the comments. What did you think of Marcus's calm strength? How did General Taylor's powerful intervention inspire you? And what are your thoughts on Officer Caldwell's shocking misconduct? We'd love to hear how this story of truth, justice, and resilience resonated with you. Your voice matters. Join the conversation below and be part of a community that believes in integrity and accountability. See you in the comments.